Psalms 106 and 107. I am picturing the family of Abraham like this. Of course, they're now known as a nation, as they have kings, Saul and David. But even the nation of Israel thought of themselves first as a family, and we'll hear that kind of language well all the way into the New Testament. Psalm 106 and 7 are very common, we hear that common phraseology in these psalms of the first person, the me or the I, speaking to Yahweh. We also hear in this reading something we've heard before, but a lot of it here, and that is that idea of us, or it's as though he's speaking to others around him. And so be ready for that kind of language where the psalmist will be speaking whether or either to his own family members, let us praise the Lord, let the redeemed of the Lord say so, we have in our text. Sometimes he'll even speak to the other Elohim in Psalm 95. We'll have that sort of language. So that's just something that we notice in the Psalms, and we've seen it before. Done well, let's mention this, that done well, a family, father and mother and children, would not experience conversions of their children. They would simply train their children in the way they should go, and when they're old, they will not depart from it. So the word or the idea of a conversion in the Old Testament is always going to be an outsider of the family, a Gentile who joins the family. Of course, there is that tension always in the mind of the psalmist or any Israelite, I'm sure. What about guaranteeing the faith of my child? Could I do that? Could I lead my child in a prayer or in some kind of recitation where I could guarantee that they would be right with God for the rest of their life? Of course, the answer would be no. Would we use the word assurance of salvation? Or I would call it assurance of righteousness maybe in the Old Testament. I think the answer to that would be yes. But notice how they would answer that. A just Israelite or a righteous Israelite would say, I have assurance of my righteousness because Yahweh is a promise-keeping and a truth-telling Elohim. So when I give him my loyalty, he will always respond to me properly. And again, that's quite a statement to make of any Elohim in the ancient world. But they knew that about Yahweh. Well, a couple of tensions come into play that I'm hearing in Psalm 106. Let's mention those. We heard in Psalm 106 this constant statement of we have erred or we have sinned, and the psalmist remembers moments in their history where the entire nation of Israel sinned and rebelled against Yahweh, and we've spoken of that even individually with people like Ishmael or Esau or Saul, where they seem to have left the family's faith and worshipped thus another god. That's the only way, really, to lose your place in the family in the sense of your propriety or your righteousness would be to change your worship to another god. By the way, in Psalm 106, verse 37, I should mention this, that we have the word shade, which is singular, shadim, translated as demon. It's one of two mentions. We have back in Deuteronomy 32:17 the other use of shadim, translated as demon. The question is often asked, are demons fallen angels? Well, that's a very late, almost a medieval tradition. In the Bible, shadim are mentioned very rarely in the Old Testament. Again, here in Psalm 106 and Deuteronomy 32:17, in both instances they are examples, watch the context of those two verses, they are examples of the Israelite nation worshiping other Elohim. So what is a shadim? What is a shade? A shade is an Elohim that is accessible to the human, whether in worship or that demon often is thought of in the New Testament sense will be that which kind of, or the Elohim, an Elohim who comes down and bothers humans or causes them grief. And that's why they, in the traditional sense, in the English tradition, we start associating this word demon with evil or fallen angels. But that's very anachronistic. I would rather recommend that when you see the word demon twice in your Old Testament, you're simply talking about an Elohim that is worshipped. Well, that's one tension that we're hearing in 106, this question of when will God, if or would it be possible that we could sin or be so unfaithful to Yahweh as a family that he would give up on the covenant, that he would leave us, that he would forsake us? And remember back in Deuteronomy 4, one of Moses' parting speeches, he said, you will, in the future, I predict, you will leave Yahweh. And Yahweh will send you as a nation into other nations to worship their gods. So that's kind of always a tension in the back of the mind of the psalmist, is what percentage of our family has to become disloyal, for example, or would it be permanent if we did, or all those kinds of questions are kind of percolating below the surface in the Psalms. That brings the other tension to mind, and this is in Psalm 106, is it verse 37, verse 47. 106:47, gather us from the goyim. Now we have that, again, a goy, singular, goyim plural, is the idea of the other nations, sometimes translated as nations or peoples or Gentiles. We've already mentioned this situation before, where a Ruth, a Rahab, can proselytize and become part of the family. That's not a goyim. A goyim is someone who, and we talked about this with the example of Orpah, for example, best case scenario, Orpah goes back and worships in Moab, but she worships Yahweh. Well, let's hang on to this as a discussion piece to be followed throughout the story. How does the family member of Israel treat a goyim who both leaves and never really comes to worship within the family, but who worships Yahweh?